So when the worst portrayer of Superman, Lois and Clark, the TV version, says the new Superman movie is woke and this and that, caused a fervor. Dean Cain, can you come into the Canadian side of the universe and talk to me? First of all, you're a fucking idiot. And second of all, Superman is Canadian. Don't shit your pants. And any Americans listening to this who thinks that America started Superman is wrong. Shuster, Joe Shuster, the brother of half of the Wayne and Shuster comedy duo, co-created Superman many decades ago. Now, according to legend, and the legend is fact, Joe Shuster was a Canadian-American comic book artist, best known for co-creating the DC Comics character Superman with Jerry Siegel in Action Comics #1. It was cover dated June 38. Shuster was involved in a number of legal battles over ownership of the Superman character. His comic book career after Superman was relatively unsuccessful. By the mid-70s, he had left the field completely due to partial blindness. He and Siegel were inducted in both the comic book industry's Will Eisner Comic Book Hall of Fame in 1992 and the Jack Kirby Hall of Fame in 1993. In 2005, the Canadian Comic Book Creator Awards Association instituted the Joe Shuster Awards, named to honor the Canada-born artist. Now, born in Toronto, July 10th, penciler and artist. Pseudonym Roots. Awards: Inkpot Award 1975, Will Eisner Hall of Fame 92, Jack Kirby Hall of Fame 93, and the creation of the Joe Shuster Award. Relatives, of course, is Frank Shuster of Wayne and Shuster fame. Born in Toronto to a Jewish family, his father, Jules Shuster, originally Shusterovich, an immigrant from Rotterdam, had a tailor shop in Toronto's garment district. His mother, Ida, had come from Kiev and now Ukraine. His family, including his sister Jean, lived on Bathurst, Oxford, and Borden streets. In 1922, Julius was listed as living at 48 Major Street and at 23 and 24 at 101 Oxford Street. Joe attended Ryerson and Lansdowne Public Schools, now Ryerson Community School and Lord Lansdowne Junior Public School with the Toronto District School Board. One of his cousins was comedian Frank Shuster of the Canadian comedy team Wayne and Shuster. He also had a brother named Frank. As a youth, he worked as a newspaper boy for the Toronto Daily Star. The family barely made ends meet, and the budding young artist would scrounge for paper, which the family could not afford. He recalled in 92, "I would go from store to store in Toronto and pick up whatever they threw out. One day I was lucky enough to find a bunch of wallpaper rolls that were unused and left over from some job. The backs were blank naturally, so it was a gold mine for me, and I went home with every roll I could carry. I kept using that wallpaper for a long time." Now, sometime in 1924, when Shuster was 9 or 10, he moved to Cleveland. There, Shuster attended Glenville High School and befriended his later collaborator, Jerry Siegel, whom he began publishing a science fiction fanzine called Science Fiction. Siegel described his friendship with a similarly shy and bespectacled Shuster. "When Joe and I first met, it was like right chemicals coming together." Now, Duo broke into comics at Major Malcolm Wheeler's Nicholson National Allied Publications, which was the future DC Comics, working the landmark New Fun, the first comic book series to consist solely of original material rather than using a reprinted newspaper comic strips, debuting with the musketeer swashbuckler Henry Duval and the occult detective Dr. Occult, both in New Fun 6, October 35. In a 1992 interview in which he used the fledgling publisher's future name, he said the two sample strips were not the ones eventually published. One was drawn on brown wrapping paper, the other was drawn on the back of wallpaper from Toronto. And DC approved them just like that. It's incredible. But DC did say, "We like your ideas, we like your scripts, we like your drawings, but please copy over the stories in pen and ink on good paper." So I got my mother and father to lend me the money to go out and buy some decent paper, the first drawing paper I ever had, in order to submit these stories properly to DC Comics. Now, Siegel and Shuster created a bald telepathic villain bent on dominating the world as the title character in the story, The Reign of the Superman, published in the Siegel's 33 fanzine Science Fiction 3. The story was not successful and the character was not used again. The following year, Siegel reused the name The Superman to develop a new character who became one of the most famous superheroes of all time. He modeled the hero Douglas Fairbanks Sr., a noted stuntman and actor, and modeled his bespectacled alter ego Clark Kent on a combination of Harold Lloyd and Shuster himself, with the name Clark Kent derived from the movies Clark Gable and Ken Taylor. Lois Lane was a model on Joanne Carter, a model hired by Shuster. She later married Siegel in 1948. Siegel and Schuster's origins as children of Jewish immigrants is also thought to have influenced their work. Timothy Aaron Peavies argued that he crafted an immigrant figure whose desire was to fit in American culture as an American, something which Peavy feels taps an important aspect of American identity. Now, Siegel and Shuster then began a 4-year quest to find a publisher. Titling the character Superman, Siegel and Shuster offered it a consolidated book publishing, which had published a 1948 black and white comic book entitled Detective Dan, Secret Operative, 1948. Siegel and Shuster each compared the character to Slam Bradley, an adventurer the pair had created for Detective Comics. Although the duo received an encouraging letter, Consolidated never again published comic books. Shuster was distraught over the rejection, and by various accounts, either burned every page of the story, with the cover surviving only because Siegel saved it from the fire, or he tore the story to shreds with only 2 cover sketches remaining. In 1938, the proposal was languishing among others at More Fun Comics, published by National Allied Publications, the primary precursor of DC Comics. Editor Vince Sullivan chose it as a cover feature for National's Action Comics 1. The following year, Siegel and Shuster initiated the syndicated Superman comic strip. So within a year, it was everywhere. When Superman first appeared, Superman's alter ego Clark Kent worked for the Daily Star newspaper, named by Shuster after the Toronto Daily Star, his old employer in Toronto. When the comic strip would receive international distribution, the company permanently changed the name to the Daily Planet. Shuster said he modeled a cityscape of Superman's home city metropolis on that of Toronto. As part of the deal which saw Superman published in Action Comics, Siegel and Shuster sold the rights to the character in return for $130 and do contract to supply the subscriber with material. Due to financial difficulties, Wheeler Nicholson had formed a corporation with Harry Donfield and Jack Leibowitz called Detective Comics Incorporated. It was under the DC label that Action Comics 1 was published. A series of mergers and name changes resulted in the publishers becoming National Periodical Publications, and then the 77 DC Comics, which had been its nickname since 1940. Now, in 1946, near the end of their 10-year contract to produce Superman stories, Siegel and Shuster sued the Detective Comics Incorporated to have their contract annulled and regain their rights to Superman. The following year, the New York State Supreme Court ruled the publisher had validly purchased the rights to Superman when it bought the first Superman story, saying the duo had transferred to Detective Comics Incorporated all of the rights in order to do the comic book Superman, including the title, names, characters, and conception. A subsequent interlocutory judgment found that rights to Superboy, however, belonged to Siegel. Detective Comics subsequently paid Siegel and Shuster $94,000 for the rights to Superboy, and the duo's written agreement acknowledging the rights to Superman belonged to the publisher. Afterward, the company removed Shuster and Siegel's byline from Superman stories. Now, there was various lawsuits through the years, but again, selling it, he never thought it was going to be that big. Now, ironically, in 1975, Siegel launched a publicity campaign where Shuster participated, protesting DC Comics' treatment of him and Shuster over the years. The Association of American Editorial Cartoons president, Jerry Robinson, was involved in the campaign along with comic book artist Neil Adams. By 1976, Shuster was almost blind and living in a California nursing home. Due to a great deal of negative publicity over the handling of the affair, the upcoming Superman movie, DC's parent company, Warner, reinstated the byline drop more than 30 years earlier and granted the pair a lifetime pension of $20,000 a year, later increased to $30,000 plus health benefits. The first issue with the restored credit was Superman 302 in August 1976. Although Shuster was now supported by a lifetime stipend from DC Comics, he fall into long-term debt, closed at $20,000 at the time of his death. After he passed, DC Comics agreed to pay off his unpaid debts in exchange for an agreement from his heirs to not challenge ownership over Superman. Now, Shuster died on July 30th, 1992 at his Los Angeles home of heart failure and hypertension. He was 78. Now, in Toronto, of course, where Shuster was born, the street Joe Shuster Way was named in his honor. Various comics he's done: Crime and Justice, 1921, 54, Hot Rods and Racing Cars, number 20, 1955, Space Adventures 11 to 13, 54. Strange Suspense Stories, number 19. 21, 22, 54. And This Magazine is Haunted, 18 to 30, 54. DC Comics, Action Comics 1 to 24. Adventure Comics 32 to 41, 103 to 109. Detective Comics 1 to 32. More Fun Comics 10 to 48. And Superboy as well in that era. New Comics 2 to 31. New York World Fair 1 to 2. And Superman, their own title 1 to 4. Now, if you want to find more about the artists, please read the non-fiction graphic novel by Julianne Volage and Thomas Campy called The Joe Shuster Story, The Artist Behind Superman. And also the copyright lawsuits were launched through the years. So, ladies and gentlemen, it was good to see the movie where they're showing Siegel and Shuster. Is usually Siegel and Shuster. But without Joe Shuster, there'd be no Superman. Because he, all the basis of Metropolis is based on Toronto. And so, Dean Cain, you're a complete fucking idiot. All the Americans who basically calling this movie woke. You don't even know what woke is. You know what woke is in Canada? Canadian. So when you say woke, you're insulting Canadians because most Canadians are easygoing. We want to see everybody happy. Right now in the United States, I recommend to any Canadian listening to this, do not go to the States again until they stop insulting us. Stop talking to 51st State, using people woke. We are not stupid. We are smarter than Americans. You know why we're smarter than Americans? Because we're not Americans. We don't want to be Americans. You're a bunch of fucking shitwolves. And if you don't know what shitwolf is, look it up. But Joe Shuster, I met Neil Adams 2 or 3 times through the years. First thing I said to him, I said, thank you for what you did for my fellow Canadian Joe Shuster. He said I was glad to do it. Neil Adams is not a shitwolf. I think Neil Adams should have been Canadian because he has that kind of, Northern New Brunswick, Elvis Presley Indian look. So, and rest in peace, Neil Adams as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what we're doing here, we're a Pulp Tales podcast. Let us know what you like, comment, subscribe, or share.